Welcome, Chris Evans Radio. We are back with Danny. I think we've talked for like 40 minutes. Should have
That
recorded a long time ago.
kind of always happens though.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, all right. So you had a question you wanted to ask me about training and volume and intensity. So let's start there.
Yeah, so just as like a little bit of framing for people, Chris and I came on and we were kind of just talking about things, and we always end up talking about some aspect of training. And I brought up the question, well, not the question, I brought up the point that we both are kind of bored to tears with the whole like top set, back offset style training. We love actually getting into the nitty gritty, like the creative part of training, and kind of knowing how and when to drive a little bit more nuance with regards to volume, intensity, split design, how to target weaknesses, how to allocate volume across multiple body parts, kind of thing. And I had a question for him where, for someone like myself who deals with chronic inflammation, and I think this is, applicable to anyone that has like, Crohn's, IBS, anything like that too. Um, how would you, Chris, structure a training split for someone who loves to like really get after it, but at the same time has a pretty firm line at which when they cross that line, the cost benefit ratio is tipped not in the good direction?
All right. So what I'll start with is kind of addressing all these people that we're talking about, right? Like anybody autoimmune, anyone with compromised recovery, and that could be due to lack of sleep, stress, um, work, life. Like, if you're only getting 4 hours of sleep, and it's choppy sleep, or you're going through a divorce, or let's say your business went bankrupt, or anything that's going to drive stress high and recovery capacity is down. The worst thing for progress we can probably do is to continue to take a stress of training and drive that up, which is what most people want instinctually do.
Totally. I
Right.
know anything about that.
Right. Or, let's say you came off a bad showing and the prep was really hard. Well, the last thing you want to do is going back in the gym on Monday and just say, hammer your physique. Because even though that's easy to want to do here, eventually you're going to reach a breaking point. Either things are going to start tearing, joints are going to start hurting, or you'll reach a point of mental burnout to where like you just want to quit. And
Bagel bone is going to get all jacked up beyond what it already is at the end of a prep too.
correct. And if you're talking about you, like your inflammation is going to go through the damn roof. And then it's like, okay, well, inflammation a lot of times can appear as fat gain. So then instinctually you want to eat less food when really it's inflammation. So you need more food, more rest, and less training. So if I'm coaching someone like that, it's kind of hard to decipher unless you really dig in and ask hard questions what to do. And for me, when I'm working with those individuals, I said to you this like off air is the first thing I always like to delineate is we have to determine the order of hierarchy for your body parts. And if you're looking at your physique, everyone has strengths, they have weaknesses, and they have muscles that are kind of in the middle that still need to be developed, but they're not a weakness. Um, and by in the middle, like what I mean, like I think personally, like side delts, lats, quad sweep can never be too big. So it's like those are always going to be something to work on because they cannot be too blown out. If you're talking about like, men's bodybuilding, most guys can never get their arms too big. Most guys can never get their adductors and quad sweep too big. Like you can never get your waist too small. That's bodybuilding, right? So when you look at the body over a course of the entirety, then I have to start playing with your week in terms of, okay, how we're going to set it up, the training frequency of body parts getting, but then how many hard sets you can recover from over the course of the whole week. And let's say, just for easy math, if that's 50, which is high, that's a lot. Like that's 10 a session if you're doing 5 sessions a week. So, what, for someone with inflammation, let's back that down to say you have 20 to play with of hard, what I would consider, or you would consider hard sets two and past failure. Um, so if you only have 20 and you're training 5 times a week, you cannot redline every body part. So you take what I would consider your weaknesses or the areas you want to improve the most, and I would give all of that 20 sets to them. So, let's say it's shoulders and quads. 20 hard sets are going there. And then I'm going to do for the rest of my body, I'm going to do probably like a more voluminous approach where the goal is to get a big pump, fill the muscle, fill it with blood, and then get out. And that might be like 3 sets of say 15, 12, 10. And even as I told you, is like, even if you reached failure on any of those three sets, I'm okay with it because you aren't doing anything like partner assisted reps, you aren't doing force reps, you aren't doing slow negatives, you aren't doing drop sets or rest pause. So I'm fine with it. You aren't doing added partials where that's all the stuff we want to save for, say, your quad and shoulders. Um, so a lot of times what I would also do with your strengths is I might take and say, hey, we're only going to train those strengths. If I'm talking about you like hamstrings, back, we may train them every 14 to 10 days. And that may really mess with some people. Like, what do you mean? I'm like, well, okay, what if we did some pull-ups on your arm day? And that's all we did for back for 1 week. And then the next week we actually had a full-on back day. What a lot of times people will find if you're talking about strengths is that would minimum maintain it, maybe even grow it. So the amount of practical application I've had doing that to people, if they're mentally strong enough to follow that direction, is really powerful. Something else I talked to you about that you could do there is that I've done with you in your rebound phase after the Olympia was I kind of gave you little bits every day to look forward to. So maybe it's one or two exercises, and I really let you drive intensity, but the rest of the session is nowhere close to failure. Um, you know, for example, like you like to deadlift. Okay, cool, we can deadlift, but we're not talking about going in there and hitting as many reps as you can with 315. Like we're gonna do 5 sets of 5 explosive and work up to a weight where the bar speed slows. Like, so it's to me, it's all about finding like levels of enjoyment that allow people to still train hard, fun, but not to the point where they're redlining and they're able to like drive themselves into a hole. And it's kind of the analogy I gave you was, if your strengths, we never want to dig a ditch. We just want to go in the gym, have a good session, and leave. On your weaknesses, we want to actually dig a few holes into the ground, a couple feet, 3, 4, 5 feet deep. But then, like, let's say your next day after you hit quads, I'm going to give you an off day. So then you're now back above the ground after a 2 day cycle.
For
So
sure.
it's always this like yin and yang push and pull. Not to be confused, I'm not talking about like back and chest and shoulders. I'm talking more of like
Yeah.
I'm going to pull on that rope a little bit, but then I'm going to give you that slack back to where it isn't me just ramming you across that line if you're doing, say, tug of war. So
Well,
we
I think where we come from with this too is just like, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. I
go
just
go.
what I love about all this is that it's not just, again, top set back off. And I think that
Yes,
we both see the need for progressive overload. And again, like I have a lot of my people use progressive overload on some movements, maybe like two or three like main movements per session, but then everything else is like let's fill you out.
correct. Yeah.
And especially people over 35, like man, they respond really well to that,
Yeah.
especially in a pro.
In a prep and even honestly in the off season.
Yeah.
And they tend to have, to use like a Hani Rambod term, like a 3D look. The muscle starts to take like a new shape to it because it's volumized. And if you pair that with like solid peri-workout nutrition, it's even better. Um,
Mhm.
and if let's say you have a weakness, like to kind of wrap up what I was saying with like the strengths and putting a lot of effort, energy into those, like with someone like you, I would make sure I'd really feed you well that day. And if you're even in a prep, I would have you do no cardio that day. So what I'm doing is I'm pulling stress out of your life and I'm adding in food for helping in aiding recovery. And then we would probably add in, some supplements in the form of like glucose disposal.
Yeah, GDA.
I'm joking. It's insulin. Yeah. Any of
Well,
my
I think that's a really good, like, again, I think it's really important for people to hear that just because you're watching top pros train with like top set, back offset style doesn't necessarily mean that most of us who have like life outside of bodybuilding, like if you're not Derek Lunsford winning, 500K for winning the Arnold, you're probably not going to be able to train the same way. And I'm not saying he trains that, top set, back off style, but part of how we got on this topic before we hit record on here too was and we're talking about Dave, my Dave, not little Dave, uh, little, and his utility of the Edmonds row. And that step forward dumbbell row has been like one of his pet movements this off season. And he's so strong, but at the same time, like if you watch a lot of his movement, it kind of like he'll move really well and kind of skips over the motion, and then the dumbbell just kind of stretches him at the bottom. So he's not really owning that entire fascial line. And we kind of got on the topic of maybe, or I told him and pulled up some of Jay Cutler's old training videos, and I was like, oh wait, like I know you love being real strong, but like, do you want to train the muscle or do you want to just do hard things for the sake of hard things? Because if you want something hard, we can make this harder on you. And then from there, we kind of got on the topic of like conditioning, how a lot of times it's kind of increased intra-session work capacity,
Yes.
generally with things like improved glycolytic enzymes, improved CO2 tolerance, improved tolerance to an acidic environment, better hydrogen ion buffering, kind of all those qualities and capacities. How would something like that affect someone who has a little bit more of an inflammatory kind of baseline? And is there anything you would do differently, or would it just be kind of what we talked about with regards to sprinkling in that high intensity when we can in terms of like absolute strength, like to failure, past failure, and then sprinkling in some of the pump work? Like, yeah, I guess I'm just thinking about that from the standpoint of generally like a more like training in and of itself is an inflammatory process. And the
Yes.
more the more we drive that acidic environment is going to drive up inflammatory factors. So, yeah,
Yeah, so let me actually start with how I would do this, what I would do to get you out of that state as fast as possible, and then I'll go back and tell you how I build in that like what I consider like workout capacity.
love it.
Um, when if I think when we go again with you, like what I'd really want to focus on is on the days where we push, and I'd like want to get you on a bike pedaling and drinking adaptogen and calming yourself. Like doing a guided meditation on a bike would literally be what I'd have you do. Close your eyes, put your headphones in, hit play on YouTube, and just turn the phone over and just do work on your breathing work and really come down out of that session.
Mm,
And this is going to sound funny because even though we do want inflammation in the body, I'd want to get it out of you fast. So, like your post-lift meal, if I was doing your nutrition, I would have things like fish oil and curcumin in it. Or if I'd even probably go in like a more pure source, like I'd have you grind like fresh turmeric over your rice that you eat post-lift. And if you think about that, like I'd want you to be as stress-free as possible. So it's like train, shoot GH, drink adaptogen, go home, eat your post-lift meal with anti-inflammation, like causing foods, and then immediately take a nap, if that's possible. In a perfect world, that's what I would have you do post. So it forces you to like almost like a baby state. So it's like we play, 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 we feed, and then we sleep. So that's like
love
that's
it.
how nerdy you want to get with it. I believe in my heart, like on your hard sessions, that will be the best and most beneficial to you to recover and to reduce the chronic inflammation that we're going to get from it. Now, to answer how I would build in work capacity for someone who has inflammation already, to me, this is a matter of just being patient and taking your time. So, as how I like to think about it is if you look at your amount of sets to be accomplished in a given session, so let's just, for example, say we got to do 15 sets for back and abs. And of those 15 sets, they're all working sets. So what's that? Let's take it down. Let's say 10. Let's say 10. Yeah, that makes it a lot easier because that's 5 exercises for 2 sets apiece. So if you do that, and let's say that takes you 45 minutes. Okay, cool. Now I want to either increase the sets or I want to decrease the time to build your work capacity. So let's say I want to say, okay, Danny, we're going to do 12 now. So I'm going to add an exercise, but I still want you to accomplish it in 45 minutes. And then we just slowly add that in to where eventually we may be doing 20 sets over the course of 60 minutes. And then what you'll find as we begin to work through that is your initial week one, for example, let's say you're doing like a hammer strength supinated pull down and you're using 2 plates aside. But when you're doing that faster pace and say it's fifth in rotation, you're only able to use a plate and a quarter aside. All right, cool. Like I want to monitor that. How quickly within the next month or 2 months can we get back to 2 plates under that new time constraint, so to speak, of pushing that pace? And to me, that's what I consider like building work capacity. What I like, if I was going to introduce that to someone, I would probably do that within a prep. And I'll tell you why. It's going to be a little bit of a cheat. Anytime we use Clen, it's going to drastically improve your VO2 max. So
Hmm.
if anybody out there is competitors and they've used Clen, what you'll find is you typically need less rest period, like because
Yeah.
your heart rate recovers much quicker, right? So that's what usually holds most people back within hard training. Like if you come to town with me and we do a triple drop set of leg press, I'm not giving you 10 minutes before we go do hack squats. Like you go, I go, then we're loading two plates off the leg press onto the hack squat and we're fucking rolling. Like,
Hmm.
and you're like, man, my heart rate never came down. Well, you better fucking figure it out. It's kind of how I think about it. But that getting punched in the face like that will teach you that if you continue to do it, it's very similar to like, I liken it to like a marathon runner. You're going to run 24 miles. It takes you 2 hours, week one. Well, by week 16, it better be shorter than 2 hours. So it's the same premise. With training, you just progressively build up your sets in a given time period. And then within that given time period, you also want to find that if you're a person that trains at a slower rate, like keep close eye on your weights and how close they are now, and then where they are, and then where you're taking them to. So
For
yeah,
sure.
that's how I kind of think about that. Like, because I mean, again, I've had a lot of people come in and train with me, and like I usually say, hey, how much let's say you're working up on, we're doing incline dumbbell press. They're like, I normally do the 150s for 8. Okay, cool. Once we get rolling, like 120s, they're starting to eat shit. And I'm like, what's the difference? And they're like, I'm not used to going at this pace. So that just takes time and practice, I think. So being patient, you have to have a tracker to like, this is where I'm starting day one. And then you just monitor it week to week is how I would look to do that.
Do you think, I'm just going to play devil's advocate here
Yeah,
because
please.
that's what I'm good
Yeah.
at. Do you think everyone, let's say someone can press the 150s usually with like a moderate, moderate rest period.
Mhm.
Um, do you think everyone needs to be pushing for a high degree of work capacity, or do you think there's a limit that's like, okay, this is good enough for now?
There's
Like at what point
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like
was that?
the tipping point of like how much weight reduction to reps, right? Like that
I
definitely.
wouldn't even say weight reduction to reps versus like just at what point it's like, okay, can you keep a session moving and make sure you're doing enough and actually challenging the system? And not, contrast that to powerlifters take like 10 minutes between sets of squats, right? Like at what point, where's the tipping point of moving fast enough versus like this isn't like benefits are asymptotic. They're gonna reach a like a plateau. Does that make sense what I'm asking?
It's a bell curve, right? Because I have some people that I have to slow down. Like and then
Now they're just doing cardio while they're training. You're like, homie, like put the 10 pounds down, like do something heavy.
I hate to stereotype, but females tend to be that way with me when they come into town to train. And it's like let's say we'll do a hard set of Bulgarian split squats. You and I both know a hard set of Bulgarian split squats, like it puts some heat on you. And then I was like, we go to RDLs next. And it's like they're like they go one right from another, heart rate's still up. I'm like, hey, pump the brakes. Just chill for a minute. What do you mean? Like, I need your heart rate to come down. So there is a fine line. I would say that if your weights are getting drastically, and by drastic, I'm trying to give a hard number here. If you're a male, if you're dropping one plate aside off of something, that's probably a bit too quick for you currently. So if at 3 minute rest between sets of incline barbell press, if I'm going for 315 for 10, if I move it down to a 1 minute rest, but I drop to 225, that's too big of a gap. So I'd
Gotcha.
say, hey, let's go to 2 minutes and let's see what that drop off is. Okay. So week one, it goes from 315, you drop it to 90-second rest or 2 minute rest, and it takes you to 275. I'm okay with that. Because knowing your back of your mind, all right, next week I got to put at least 295 on the bar and get 6. And then the next week I want to take 295 and I want to get at least 8. And then 295 for 10. And then the next week I'm going to go right to 315.
I think, in addition to heart rate, just one like KPI I use for people often that I work with is like the last one, what should I do with my rest period? I'm like, take the rest that you need to be able to move with proficiency.
Correct.
I'm
Yes.
interested in your heart rate because it's going to probably stay elevated, especially if they're training with any caffeine in their system. Like
Agreed.
it's going to take a while to drop down. So I'll tell people a lot, like if you feel like you can nail the muscle and you can maintain technique, you're good. Take what you need and no longer. This is what I tell people a
If
lot.
anything compromises form or execution, it's too fast.
Hmm.
And like I was saying
I
with
think that's the red light right there.
yes. And if anything, again, you almost have to create a standard or a control. of like, okay, my normal rest period is 3 minutes. Okay, cool. Let's kick it down to 2:45. Over the course of a year, I can get it down to a minute if I wanted to. You know, you just have to do it strategically. Like you wouldn't go, I would never take someone who normally rests 4 minutes and put them at one. Well,
Right.
maybe for something like arms or shoulders, but that's not doing dumbbell rows, or hack squats or leg press. Like if you figure if someone like Dave or I are training leg press, if we go leg press to hack squat, it's going to probably take 4 minutes to transition machine to machine solely because of plate unloading if we're by ourselves.
Right. Oh,
You know
for
what I mean?
sure. Sure.
So the difference there is I think a lot of guys, what they do is they'll unload the leg press, load the hack squat, and then they'll rest their 3 minutes. Well, you don't need all that.
Yeah.
That's where I'm
Question I
starting.
have for you, just like on the practical standpoint, again, for like takeaways for people, right? Because it's great if we can train in the middle, like you and I have the luxury of training midday when there's no one there if we want to.
Yes.
But, for us, let's say we're going to destination on a Saturday morning, to be able to get every piece of equipment that we want and maintain rest do, someone's on something, do one more set, can I hop on there with you kind of thing. Um, how important is it to standardize for that and, recognize things we can and cannot control? How do
Okay.
you handle people?
So if I was in that situation, doing what you just said, control what I can control. So if let's say I want to do that prime extreme row and there's three dudes on it just going like this, I'm probably going to go do a T-bar somewhere, right? And then I just have to realize like one or let's say I go over and like, hey guys, how many sets y'all got? They go, we got one left. Okay, cool. I'll wait. So even though that might add, say, 3 minutes to my rest period on that time, once I get on it, I'm picking that pace back up. Like I'm gonna
Hmm.
refine that mindset and that pump because I think you will appreciate this if you're in a groove and you have to slow down because either someone comes up to you and asks you a question, or you have to wait on a piece of equipment, or let's say you have to go take a piss and there's people in the bathroom and you're like, fuck, now I gotta sit here and I gotta piss, I gotta wash my hands. Like I've transitioned from in the set to okay, now I just use the restroom, wash my hands. I'm completely out of that like role. So now I just need to
Yeah.
recapture that, I guess is probably the better word. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what it is. There must be like an unwritten rule, but Dave and I will be, at the gym together at the same time, and no one will approach him. And I'll get asked like, "Hey, girl, you good?" And I'm like, "Bro, my headphones are in. Like, I've got a deadlift bar in my hands." Like, so I think for a lot of people, just kind of getting used to feeling like we're not really going to offend someone that much if we don't respond.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, I think a lot of girls and guys are afraid. They're afraid of that. Um, so just kind of holding your space can be really important for that too. Really quickly, I wrote down something
Yes.
when we were talking about. You mentioned like the bike and taking adaptogen like pre-session for me, and I want to highlight.
Post. That's at the end.
Oh, post.
Yes.
Interesting. Okay. I was even thinking like pre. Um, and I could make a case for either one.
Yes,
Uh,
you could. Yep.
and kind of want to bring up why that might be helpful for some people or others, just from a biomechanical standpoint. I've talked a lot about structure very often on here, and it's something I talk a lot about in my office hours group. But people with certain structures are going to be more prone to having way, 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 way increased vagal tone. And that vagal tone is ultimately going to be what kind of drives our limit of what we can do in a session. So being able to kind of wind that down before a session can be really, really helpful. So I think we've talked on other episodes about, breath work pre and post session, who it might be good for, who it might not be good for. Dave does not need that because he is super chill anyway. If I get him any more chill, he's not going to ramp back up, right? Like,
Take a nap.
but for someone like me, one of the things that's let me kind of get back hard into training without worrying about the seizures as much has been really getting good KPIs on vagal tone, manipulating things like visual field, expanding visual field to allow autonomic regulation, things like that. Um, so I think it's just important to kind of recognize, and we were talking about inflammation, and I think you could think about that as a blanket statement of people who are like just generally like more wound up, have a harder time relaxing, like, that kind of just like spring-loaded person.
Yep. Yep.
A lot
So
of times our personalities are going to show what we really need to do before a session. And it can be that simple, I think.
I can tell you this, like the amount of high performing individuals outside of the gym that I used to train, a lot of times what I'd have them do is like the first thing we do when they would get with me is do what you just talked about, which is what I like to refer to as like centering the mind and body, making it one. Because, let's say they're on an aggressive business call the whole way to the gym to train with me. It's really hard to go from that to get out of your car, walk in there, and I'm like, all right, bro, we're gonna go smash leg curls now. Like
Yeah,
his brain or her brain is in an altered state. So a lot of times, like what I get those individuals to do is like I get up on a stairmaster with them, and I'm like, look, it's like the Kai Green approach. Like every step we take is with intent. And I want you to think about contracting the hamstring, contract the glute, contract the quad. One, two, three, one, two, three, every step. And it's like level 3 or 4, maybe. It's like we're at snail's pace. And I'm beside them, like step for step with them. And I'm talking to them like, okay, today here's what we want to accomplish. So all I'm doing is distracting their brain to whatever they were thinking about. Now we're beginning to focus on, okay, for the next hour, I'm going to take you to a place in a session that's going to demand progress. And like a lot of times for some people, if that may be like an adductor machine, or that I might have an orange band from Elite FTS if we're doing, say, an upper body day and we're doing like plum parts and over and backs and like Y raises, T raises, like we're doing some rows on the TRX, we're hanging from a pull-up bar. It completely is just erasing and evaporating all negativity, stress, life, and focusing. So that extra 3 to 5 minutes that I added to their workout, or if I'm training someone, it would take away from their session, would be way more important than just going into session one or set one.
absolutely. I think the people who train alone too, like I'm guilty of this. I don't rarely, I won't say I don't ever. I rarely actually do that stuff for myself. I get to the gym, I'm like, okay, what I gotta do, what's next, what I have to go do next. Meanwhile, I watch Dave walk in, he like does his primers, he's thinking about his session, he's these like bang on sessions every time, right?
Right? Yeah.
I think the busier that we get, and there's science will support this too, the more kind of sympathetically task oriented we become, the harder and harder it becomes to actually volitionally contract muscle.
Yes. Agreed.
Which makes sense, right? Like, duh, like intuitively we know that. But of course we needed research to show us. Um,
It's a dog chasing cars, right?
yeah, totally.
That's, that's how I think about it. Like there is so much power in the ability to like go into what I can consider like an environment where my brain is shut off and it's only focused on training, as opposed to I can't imagine if I was training with like earbuds in and like every text message I got, it was coming through my ears. Every email, it's coming through my ears. And it's like even when I'm trying to focus, I can't because I'm being pulled in another direction. And again, I know that some people aren't afforded the luxury of being able to turn off life for 60 to 90 minutes. But if there's ways that we can reduce that noise, I highly recommend that, especially for people who have a problem with controlling stress, anxiety, and trying to have good sessions.
So we had 9 weeks out from the Olympiad. My mom was really, really ill. She went septic, and we thought she was we thought we were gonna lose my mom. It was not a fun call. And so um for me, what I did is we have, fancy modes we can use on our phones now where only certain people and their text messages can come through.
Right.
Um,
Yep.
but I think it's really, really important to just remember that there are very few true emergencies.
Yeah.
And those
Yes.
true emergencies, generally, we can give those people access to us and protect those boundaries a lot more.
I'll share something extremely personal if it's funny. Um, it's actually embarrassing, but it is what it is. Something I struggle with is what you just said is like I always want to be readily available for my clients, right? Like I want to be able to say that my response time
You
is
text me back after like 3 minutes and be like, sorry for the delay. I'm like, bro, I just finished sending that. Like,
yeah,
and I'm not being quiet right now.
yeah, I know, right? Yeah, it's a problem. Yeah, literally, it's like ADHD at its finest.
It is Thor's hammer coming through the phone. I got you. What do you need?
Right, right. Like I always want to try to like just problem solve shit, fix it for you, and move on, right? Angela said to me one day, she's like, Chris, like it's just bodybuilding. You aren't saving lives. And I'm like, fuck, you're right. She's like, take a deep breath. Like, let's finish dinner and then you can respond, right? Like, because the idea before this last like 2 years of me sitting down having a dinner with her and Daxon at the table and leaving my phone in another room would cause me like a panic attack. Not
Mhm.
really, but it would drive me bananas.
Yeah.
Where now it's like I've forced myself to be like, okay, I'm having a meal. I'm not going to work for the next 15 or 20 minutes. And it's okay. And when I pick my phone or computer back up,
15 to 20 minutes is all, like, that's it for you?
right. Yeah. So I'll only share that because like we were at a dinner one time and I was just hammering fucking client questions. And she looked at me, she grabbed my hand and she's like, hey, Chris, it's not life threatening. Give me 30 minutes. And I was like, okay, you're right.
I
Yeah.
think that's hard. For anyone who's working with a coach in the online space, it's definitely like, or if you are a coach in the online space, right? I mean, like it's a service-based industry, and obviously for people like us, like we love what we do, we care a lot about it. And at the same time, it's really easy to get lost in that. And it's really easy to feel like your whole purpose is like you're kind of just this like accessory to making everyone else feel better. And I think clients can sense when that happens. Like clients can sense when a coach's self-worth kind of decreases a little bit. And that is like the most unattractive thing in a coach, right? Like when we work with people, whether you are a coach or you're working with a coach, like you want to be working with someone who's couple steps ahead and like bringing you forward. Um, so yeah, I think boundaries are super, super important for that. And I mean, I'm glad that you take at least 15 to 20 minutes, but like, gosh, I have my contract with people. As soon as they sign up with me, I'm like, these are my work hours. If you contact me outside work hours, it'll be like right when I get back, unless there's like, a huge emergency. And I'm still responding to messages at 10 at night, even though I'm not supposed to, but I think that that's probably one of the best things that coaches can do for themselves in their service contract. Like just outline that. You're allowed to be a person too. You're going to show up for better. You're going to show up so much better for people when you actually take the time to let first things be first.
And look, this is gonna sound really like I'm looking for sympathy, and that's not it at all. But it's really funny, like the rare occasions where I'll say, hey, like I'm gonna be on vacation, I'm only gonna answer emails from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. and then I'm gonna come back and do it from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m., right? Just for example. In the amount of times, like I would have like long-term good clients, like, hey Chris, just one question real quick. And then it turns into like a 35-minute conversation. Like,
Always,
it's like,
always.
I know you're on vacation, but, and every time I read that, I'm like, fuck me. Like,
Well, it's hard because I don't think people realize what they're asking. It happens to me all the time. Hey, let me just ask you a quick question about my back pain. And I'm like, hold on, there are literally 15 different kinds of back pain. I don't even know what kind we're talking about right now. Like, I do not think you realize what you're asking.
yeah.
Uh, that is hard. I get that. People ask me that mid-set at the gym. I get sometimes in the middle of a rest pause set. Someone came up to ask me about their shoulder. I was like, sister, really? Um, yeah, I kind
Like,
of
you
get
have
both.
my Instagram, just shoot me a DM, I'll get back to you.
Yeah, except if I'm honest, I'm not good about that either. We both know that. You send me a TM and like 3 days later, I'm like, oh, that was funny, Chris.
I I had that last week. I just finished 8 plates for 31 on the leg press. I am eating shit, mind you, pulling weights. And a guy comes over, hey man. I was like, oh fuck me. I was hoping he was gonna say, I'll take the leg press and I'll help me strip the plates off, is what I was hoping. And he goes, what do you think about keeping the big three in if health is my number one priority?
Oh my gosh.
Fuck. I'm like, do you see the sweat dripping off of my nose?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
This is
I'm
a
sure.
question I can ask you another time too, is like, the idea of like a GPP face for a deconditioned bodybuilder, like someone
Oh,
who
that's yep.
maybe used to, I mean, again, I have my thoughts on this, but someone who maybe used to compete, took a couple years off, maybe had kids or something, and now like, again, like their work capacity is probably really, really low. So from a systemic standpoint, in terms of like oxidative capacity, like, I mean, just everything, like, what do we want to do with them?
You know, that
There's
that
no one better for that than you.
that is such a great question, and I'll tell you why. Anytime I get somebody that comes back to me after time off and they get into it and they're like, let's say we're gonna do 4 exercises for lower body, and I'll make it really easy. Let's say it's leg curl, leg press, hack squat, RDL. Four things. They get through like two of them. They're like, bro, my muscles are trashed. And I'm like, well, yeah, because they're extremely deconditioned, of course. And you know what it was like before. And like the
Yeah.
pump almost becomes so excruciating that you can't move right. Like I will on that same, I was just telling you about my leg day with that leg press. Like I ended up finishing that day with, I got on a horizontal leg press, put on like a moderate weight and just saw how many few sets I could get 100 total reps. Well, my VMO started to like lock up and it was like, it was like that. So I'm over there trying to stretch them out on a stretching area. And one of the staff come over and goes, "Sir, are you having a seizure?" No, 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 no. I was like, "I'm good." And the lady was like, "You can see your veins through your sweatpants." I'm like, "Yeah, we're good."
You're like, thanks for that compliment, by the way. That was a compliment.
Right, right.
That's
So
hilarious. Oh man.
uh, I chuckle at that only because it's like, it's really challenging because I think everyone remembers like that. And they don't realize that like when you have time off, when you get back into like an semblance of hard training, or honestly, not even maybe hard, but just pushing your body, that happens and happens quick. Like the muscle will fill up with so much blood that it becomes almost useless. Like
Yeah.
I've had that happen to guys on a leg extension. Like we start quads with leg extension, but they're so deconditioned that after 3 or 4 hard sets, like their quads are shot. Like the idea of doing a leg press is pointless.
Yeah, I have someone like that right now. But he's also like looking better. He's in prep right now. I'm not doing his nutrition,
Yeah.
but he's looking better and better every week. And so then it was kind of a question of like, okay, so then let's see this from a bird's eye view from him. Like, were you really that deconditioned? If you're getting that much pump into the muscle, and maybe it's that you really only need like that much, well, more than like extensions quad work, but like, yeah.
I think what I would do in that scenario and what I've have done with people in the past is I kind of work antagonistically. So let's say you get your quad super pumped, just go train hamstrings and then come back to it. Like I've
Mhm.
had to do that sometimes
Get some
post
reciprocal.
for arms because your pumps are so crazy. Like if you do 2 bicep exercises in a row, you can't do shit. So it's like, okay, you do 2 tricep and then back to bicep. Like, and you kind of construct your whole session that way if you needed to be, to where it's like you alternated hamstring quad, you say alternated either chest and shoulders, which probably isn't a good pairing. It's more like chest and back would be a better pairing. And then you did the same thing with arms. Um, and you could even do, if you do shoulders by themselves, this is going to sound funny, but I would do pair it with with a shrug because that's going to stretch out your shoulders. So if you did like a moderately heavy load for shrug, so for every say 3 sets of shoulders, I'd do 1 set of either dumbbell, barbell, or Smith machine shrugs, and that's going to loosen your shoulders up to keep that
You
going.
talking like standing shrug or like a Kelso shrug?
Either one. So I used to always love hammering shoulders and then going into traps because my shoulders would get so pumped it would be hurt. And then the shrug is like pulling down and stretching that shoulder out. If I especially spend time in the like lengthened position of a traditional shrug.
Yeah. I mean, you're getting a lot of like alternating occlusion in the area too. Just thinking about, I want to kind of come back to when you had that massive quad cramp.
Yes, yeah.
Um, Something I've had my people do at that point is like anything you can do to alternate being squeezed and non-squeezed. Which is kind of what you're going at with like working the other body part via reciprocal inhibition and just trying to change neural tone a little bit. But the mechanical occlusion of thinking you have like blood flow in that area and being able to shunt that a little bit elsewhere can be really helpful.
Yes. Which is why I like a leg curl. I should have probably just went and got on a leg curl as opposed to trying to stretch.
I mean, you made the hard decision. I was like, that's like the last thing I want to do at that point.
Right. Yeah. 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 It was, yeah. That's I always kind of laugh because I'm like, oh yes, total efficiency was achieved. Because I'm trying to
Yeah.
think, in that session I did single leg curls, adductor, glute bridge, occluded leg extensions, leg press, and then horizontal leg press for 100, and I was cooked.
Wait, say that again. Leg curls, adductors, occluded leg
Glute
extensions,
glute
press.
bridge, occluded leg extensions, regular leg press like plate loaded, and then I did horizontal leg press for 100.
Was your regular leg press just a like a linear one? Was it more quad or glute bias?
It was more quad biased, and it was so I did a very super controlled negative on my sets pyramiding up. So I did slowish negatives, pause in the hole for sets of 8 until I got to 8 plates, and then I just did 8 plates for as many reps as I could do.
How many did you get?
32,
It's 32? 30. Yeah, wow.
32, 31. I'll have to look back at my numbers, but yeah,
Ridiculous.
it was they were fucked. And then I dropped down to 4 plates, came all the way down, set in the hole for a 5 count, and then pressed like 3/4 to lock out, and then just kept going until I had to use my hands to push the carriage up.
Man, that is something I've had Dave do a lot of lately, not going to lockout. And there are a lot of sets he looks at me afterwards and he's like, I don't know if I love you more for that or hate you more for that. Probably both.
It is,
Um,
it is so many people lose leg progress because of that thing.
Not
Of
only that, it beats up their joints so bad. I've got someone else I'm working with right now who's really big dude, super strong. And every time he sent me his first set of hacks and we started working together, I was like, bruh, uh, I can tell you why your knees hurt.
you know,
Like, how about you just like snap those suckers back on every rep with like 8 plates loaded on the Arsenal hack?
oh wow.
Um, yeah.
It's I think that's where you and I's age worked in our advantage because when we grew up watching bodybuilding, everyone was about constant tension. It's like they almost avoided the extremes on both ends. So it's
Yeah.
almost like what I will always call those like piston reps, where it's just like you find the groove and you just go.
Yeah.
And there's no extreme like pause in the hole or stop at the top or lock out at the top, however you view that. Um, yeah, that's how I learned how to train. So to me, like that kind of feels natural to the point where one of my original training partners said to me, he's like, Chris, have you ever noticed like you'll go rhythmic into the last rep, and then the last rep you'll go all the way down, pause, and then come all the way up. And I'm like, no. And I'm like, that's pretty cool when I think about
That
it.
makes a lot of sense though. That is cool. That is cool.
Yeah. And it's just something I think I just did instinctually because it felt right. It's almost like, okay, hey,
Mhm.
you did 10, and then the 11th, like go down, full stretch, and then just fight like hell to get to the top, rack it, be done. Um, yeah, that is, and I think most people they don't when they're doing their sets, they think very black and white, like, okay, the program says 10 reps, I'm gonna do 10. And they don't think about I'd rather you do constant tension for 8 and it burn the muscle up as opposed to you doing all 10,
Mhm.
but barely. There's a big difference in pumping those reps and
For
that
sure.
each rep you're just it's like more blood, more blood, more blood, where it's like if you go down, come up, lock out, go down, come up. And like I don't have you ever done like I know a lot of people talk about like breathing squats where
Yeah.
every rep you like do a deep breath. I think people like overemphasize that way too much.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I haven't thought about breathing style in a long time. And now, I mean, gosh, I haven't thought about those since 2012, 2013. And now I'd be thinking about, what's happening with regards to more the biochemical component than the actual like working the muscle.
Right.
Like, I think that, with what you were just talking about with like tension and whatnot, it's a really good strategy for people to take when they've like progressed something so far that adding more weight just feels kind of stupid. So like why am I in my training right now? Like I've kind of gotten back into things. I'm touching weights on the squat press that I'm like, realistically, could I put more weight on here? Sure. But like, is there any reason someone my size should be taking 9 plates on that? Probably not.
Right. Yep.
And I mean, like they were good quality. Like there's sets that I know. Like if I look back at it and I send it to Chris, he's gonna say those are great.
Yep.
Um, but then there's like that internal tension of like, okay, like is it really realistic for me to add more weight here? And like if something seems like it's extreme, there's probably a cost with it, right? For me, it's a lot of like pelvic floor compression that drives hip pain, knee pain, a whole bunch of stuff I don't need to deal with.
Yep.
So my thought, and I told Dave, I was like, I think I'm gonna strip it down to like 5 plates, which is like half.
Yeah.
Uh, and get as brutal on that muscle as I can.
Correct.
Um, that's probably what I'm gonna do next week. I took 7 plates for 20 as a back offset, unbroken, pumped, no lockout. And again, like they looked good.
Yeah.
How was my pump when I got off of it? Pretty good.
Right.
Could it have been better? Probably. How am I going to do that? And some of that is more related to biomechanics too. I think when people have a hard time really getting a pump, even if they're controlling tension, it comes down to like being able to maintain good foot contacts. Most people kind of lose their needle heel as they approach more hip flexion, things like that. And that makes a huge difference just in pressure control. But
Getting on that muscle and staying on is a skill that
it
takes
really is. I send your videos to my clients all the time. Like I had a guy last week where I was like, I need you to like not throw the weight around. Here's Chris. I need you to watch his videos and mimic that execution for your chest training.
right.
He
Yeah.
messaged me back. He was like, bro, he's so cool. I was like, I know. I know he's cool. Now I need you to train like him.
Right, right. You know, I think for me,
Yeah, you were called cool.
oh yeah, right, that's a win. You know, I think chest for me, when I send videos to people, that really helps them because it's like, man, you can see that muscle firing through two shirts and a hood. Okay,
Yeah,
clearly I'm on it. Like,
yeah,
but I know that not everyone is at that level yet, or they have that much meat off their chest. Like, but you can still move with that intent. Like you should still be rising and falling through things. And a lot of times I think people get the idea of load correlated so heavily to hypertrophy. And I think sometimes like, hey bro, like we aren't in the business of moving all the weight. I want it to be heavy, but on the muscle. Like,
yeah.
and I think a lot of times when people hear me say
Really
that,
good definition.
they think like pink dumbbells, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I'm not of that camp.
You want to get strong. Yeah, yeah.
Right. You know, you know that classic powerlifter squat where every time you come up, you go like, and then go. Like when I get bodybuilders that send me that on a hack squat, on a leg press, on a back squat, I'm like cringing. I'm like, you aren't powerlifting. Stop it.
Yeah, man, I could talk for a good 30, 40 minutes just about pressure management, how to breathe when you're unracking a hack. This is actually something I looked at with Dave this week. He'd been having a little bit of knee pain the last couple weeks. He's been sitting a lot more, just really stressed. And the body's stress pattern from a biomechanical standpoint will throw us into this predictable asymmetry. But he was like, you know what can I do today that's not gonna have me like, handling a ton of weight? Like, what can I do? Especially after this hernia surgery. And I was like, honestly, man, like we need to work on your pressure management.
Oh,
Because
right. Yeah.
you unrack back squat and you literally unrack with your chest and your back.
Oh, right. Yes. Yeah.
And so we looked a lot at his pressure management. We looked at things like heel contacts, and he got off of that with probably the biggest quad pump with 4 plates, which again, like for him, he's taken, 9 for multiple sets. Um, and it really is, if someone like you and someone like Dave can make 3 and 4 plates feel hard, I don't understand why the guys who are walking around at 180 skinny fat feel like they can't. And I think you and I probably have a similar take in having some sort of baseline strength that needs to be built upon. And there's probably two different skill sets that move forward, somewhat interdependently.
Yes.
Um, and what you just said, I think about like, no, no, get strong, use the weight to put on the muscle is huge. I have a hard time with that because I go in and I'm like, man, I want to be strong. Like my ego is, I've always been that person that I walk into the gym and like, okay, she can hang, but
Right. I
it had
think we,
grown.
I think we all have that to a certain degree, right? Like, especially, I know I had that more so when I didn't have the muscle I have now. Is I was like, hey,
Mhm.
I belong here. I can press the 150s. I can row
Yeah,
the 160s. Like I belong here with you guys. Trust me.
I
Where,
can pull, 4 plates for 12.
mhm, yep,
Great.
yep. Um, and in that a lot of time now I chuckle at it because I, anytime like a smaller guy or a girl was beside me like curling more than I do, I just laugh at it.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is a true
Napoleon
example.
syndrome, Napoleon syndrome is the thing.
Right. I'm like, hey, you could go grab those 15s and really make that bicep work, right? Um, yeah, it's like, there's a big difference in making that muscle scream. And I think this is how I tell people, or what I had to come to terms with personally is I want to make my muscle that I'm training burn as quickly as humanly possible. So if that's 2 reps, 3 reps, 4 reps, and then once that burns out, I need to keep that in there and fight as long as I can to maintain that pain tolerance.
Hmm.
When I started to think about weight that way, as opposed to, okay, like this week I got 365, and this next week I got 405, and then 455, I began to see more growth in the muscle.
I
And
wish more people just took the last 15 seconds. Like that's the most valuable 15 seconds of airtime we've had, I think.
yep. And I think that's what if I'm speaking about leg training specifically, that's what holds so many back because they tie the weight to progress, but all the weight tends to lead to is knee and hip and back pain. And it's like, man, your quads aren't even pumped yet. And we did 6 sets of quads. And they're like, yeah, but yours are after one set. I'm like, yeah, because I made that quad work, man. Like it's a different mindset, but a thing that I'll give a hard example of it was a guy who's been with me for 4 years. He has, well, in his mind, bad knees. He doesn't have bad knees. He has an ego problem.
Hmm.
And his ego says, Chris, I got to squat 5 plates. And I say, if we hack squat 3 plates with good form, your knees wouldn't hurt and your quads would be bigger. And he's like, yeah, but it's not 5 plates on the barbell. I'm like, You're right, bro."
Yeah. That's so
He,
sad how much I get that. And I think the power lifter in me again, who's always been recognized for being really strong, like it's really hard to let go of that. But then I watch girls who've been training like half the time that I have more muscle than I do, and I'm like, maybe I should maybe I should change that, you know? Mhm.
my brother got, we didn't end up actually posting the video because I actually felt bad for him. I literally broke him at elite with a quarter of the weight he normally uses for legs. And he literally couldn't even walk to his car. And I was like, what's the takeaway here, man? And he's like, the takeaway is your statistic. I'm like, no, no, no.
Well, it's true, but there's another truth with that.
I said, did you see how I made your quads only do the work? And then you saw how weak they were when I made them work. And I was like, there's a reason they're small, and they're small because they don't work. You let your body move the weight, not the muscle. And that's really a hard pill to swallow when, you're a successful competitive lifter or competitive bodybuilder who has had success, and you
For
tie to
sure.
like, honestly, if you put him and I in the gym together, he would lift more weights than me. Like more leg press, more hack squat, more back squat.
So knowing Chaz too, that's super interesting based on just like all the structural bias I talk about because he's an arrow and you are a wide.
Right,
Arrows can be very, very efficient. We are so bad at targeting muscles, and it has much more to do with pressure management. And I don't just mean like here. I mean like there's fluid pressure in our joints, there's fluid pressure in our muscles, there's way more fluid dynamics going on in our body than most of us think about on any given day.
right.
But like knowing Chaz, I could totally see that.
Yeah. No, he was filming. That wasn't him, me training him.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
oh, just kidding. JK.
that is a valid point. But yes, no, he was filming and we decided not to post it because it was a bad look. Um,
Oh, I could
uh,
see that.
but it's all right. Listen, it was a very valuable lesson that needed to be learned. And I mean, listen, he still battles with it time to time because I think instinctually you always want to go back to more weight, more reps equals bigger. And it doesn't always mean that if you're not working the muscle. Like,
Mhm.
because here's what I'd always say to him is like after every hard session he would do, he's like, my knees and hips hurt. Yeah, no shit. What does it feel like when you do my sessions? Zero knee pain. I can barely walk for a week, so my quads are sore. Yeah, yeah, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So it comes down to kill the ego, grow the muscle. And I think a lot of times that's harder said or harder to be done than actually said. It's,
Oh, for sure. For sure.
and I
Well,
guess
I
it's
mean,
like,
some of us like doesn't get in there and want to like, tear shit up.
it, I think it hurts because it's like so many are like, they don't want to admit, like, oh, that muscle was actually weak.
Hmm.
Where in my mind, like that fires me up. I'm like, okay, cool, it's weak now, but it won't be.
Yeah, we've got, road for progress there. There's a runway.
Yeah, because I mean, if you came to me with a problem, with a missing body part, and you said, I'm super strong at it. Here are the muscles, or here are the exercises that I use to train it. I watch the videos, I see you in person, like the muscle is working, but it's not growing. Then I'm like, shit.
That's a problem.
Right.
Hmm.
Then I'm
Yeah.
like, nerve, spine, degenerative muscle, something's going on.
What do you
Where
call your favorite PT friend?
yes, yes, yes. Another valid point. Um, but when guys and girls send me their training videos and I find holes in it, like they almost think I'm coming down on them. Like, no, this is exciting because all
Yeah.
these cues I just gave you, that's gonna fix this exercise and hopefully fix the muscle. So, like, I I used to love it when John would be like, "Hey, Chris, like move your elbow here or move your hand here." Or like when you came in, you're like, "Hey, do this exercise." And I'm like, "Hell yes, great. Tell me where I'm terrible."
I think that's a great coaching point for people too. I tell people all the time, like if I give you feedback, it's not saying you suck at something. It's saying like, wow, we have some really low-hanging fruit here. And I love when there's low-hanging fruit because that means that you are going to make progress. If I
Yes.
can't find anything wrong, that's when I kind of start to panic. I'm like, I don't know if I can help you.
Yeah. I'll finish this off with a good story. I had a guy who, if you chopped him off the waist, he had easily one of the most impressive upper bodies ever. Hard, big, full, round, grainy. Like the muscle was just crisp. From the lower body, glutes well developed, hamstrings well developed, quads absolutely non-existent.
Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't
Wow.
from lack of effort. He was a football guy. He played Division I football. And when he came to me, he's like, "Hey, Chris, like, can you fix these legs for me?" And I'm like, "I think we can." And I was like, "Let's just come in the gym and like let me just show me what you do." And I just wanted to observe. And it looked good. And I was like, ugh. Effort was there, like pain tolerance was there. The execution of exercise looked good. You could see the muscle firing. They were just small. And I'm like, I was like, "How long have you been doing this?" He's like, "5 years." I'm like, "Oh, fuck."
Oh no.
Yeah. And then it was what does your food look like? And I mean, obviously, when your upper body's huge, like clearly you
Yeah,
know how to
something's
eat.
on point. Yeah.
So he could eat enough food. I was like, "Okay, cool. Like, got that." Like, so then I had to go to like, let's start assessing like how his body works. All looked good. Checked all the boxes. And it led me to, okay, cool. Then I have to do something so extreme with you outside of the box that that muscle is going to change. If I admitted to you what I did, I'll like, we were
Now I
training.
really want
Yeah, this is awful. Like, I don't recommend this out there to anyone, but I had control of him. He worked for me as a personal trainer, so I had a lot of control. He trained legs twice in one day for 6 weeks, and we would do 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, and it was like heavy brutality in the afternoon, and in the morning it was like crazy pump, fast out of there in like 45 minutes, and it was like all quads, like giant set, hammer, 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 go home, nap, eat 3 meals, come back, and then we would just rage on a hard leg day. And that is the only way we saw progress, and it wasn't as good as I wanted it to be.
wow.
So,
Did he have any sort of like anything else neuromuscularly going on? Any like spine issues or anything?
not that we knew of, and I got all of it tested. We had X-rays done. It was literally the most probably complex case I've ever worked for someone with a missing body part.
Hmm.
And it was literally just quads. And what's funny about that, it was everything hip to knee. It was adductor, it was VMO, every rec film, lateralis, you name it. It was everything. Like there wasn't one portion of his quad that was good. It was all small
I
underdeveloped.
have so many questions.
Now, and here's to even
Probably like,
to add even more to this, okay, they were extremely defined, separated, and strided. It was just thin.
well,
Yeah, yeah. That was probably a decade ago, but yeah. I haven't seen him in a long time to know if they're any better or not, but he stopped competing. So, yeah.
think a lot about like, I mean, pelvic floor issues at that. I'm thinking like anterior pelvic outlet issues and inlet. Just thinking like rec fem and stuff. What does spine look like?
Straight as an arrow.
Super straight, not like no curve.
No,
That makes
super
a
straight.
lot more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had a lot of anterior pelvic compression, which is going to decrease if those muscles are concentrically oriented. He can't go that direction.
Mm. And see, he was a good deadlifter, strong presser, had probably some of the most impressive shoulders, and like his entire backside, like
For
even in,
you to say he's well developed is like meaningful. Like
oh yeah. I
dude,
mean, not
complete.
so much. I need you to envision like a smaller version of Keon, upper body, upper back, like just knots on knots on knots of muscle. And it was like gorgeous, like good separation, strided, like erectors was a
Man,
Christmas.
that's so disappointing for him. He's like, I have this freaking awesome upper body. I know how to train, but my legs just go nowhere.
I mean,
That's so disappointing.
his upper body's so good that he won multiple regional shows overalls because that's how just crazy. And again, we could get his quads peeled. Like they were lean. It was the tail of that missing quad and adductor. Yeah.
I would ask, this sounds really weird. I'd like be really curious what his feet look like. Not like in an OnlyFans kind of way, but just like
I can tell you I didn't pay any attention to that other
you
than
didn't even stare at his feet, Chris? God.
yeah, huge problem.
Here.
Missing gap.
Seriously, start looking at people's feet more. But
Can you imagine if like you were a male trainer and you like had that problem with a girl and you're like, I need to see your feet. She's like, oh, hard pass, buddy.
yeah, yeah. Well, yeah,
I'm
I'd
gonna
be
take a
really
picture of your feet. No, no, you're not.
I joke with people because I will ask someone if I need a better picture. I'll send them a message on my app and I'm like, hey, I need a picture of your feet. And I'll just give no context sometimes, depending on who it is. Because
Right.
most like I work with mostly dudes. They don't care. They think it's like funny. So it's a good
Yeah.
time.
Yeah. Yeah. That's really comical.
I have a friend of mine who's a chiropractor. Brilliant. If anyone's in I'm sorry, Indianapolis, uh, he's like the man. Send me a message or drop a comment. He's phenomenal. But he was sending me a video today of someone he was working on. He was getting all sorts of like crazy vestibular systems, literally like could not contract a muscle, like walked like a board kind of thing, super
Oh,
dizzy. He did one, like he gave a little like band around her big toe for like 30 seconds and had to start like, changing peripheral vision just for autonomic regulation.
mhm.
And all of a sudden everything kicked out. And she was just like, well, you know a lot about the body, don't you? But yeah, man, big toe and heel, huge. That's what she
that
said. But
that is something I know very, very, very little about. So yeah.
yeah, man. Every time I think I'm starting to get my feet under me as a clinician, I meet someone like my friend Dom that I was just talking about, or like Dylan Seeley is another one. He's Dr. Serrano's son-in-law. Just freaking brilliant people. Absolutely brilliant. So
Cool. Well, another great episode that we did not talk about shoulders. Um,
next time we actually will.
yeah, I'm not promising it, but we're gonna try to.
Yeah, we have some good topics coming
Agreed.
up.
Agreed. All right, guys, girls, thank you for listening. Another episode of The Bro and the Brain. See you guys.